Stupid thing. Boom. Okay, now we're recording.
Technical difficulties are real.
So, an article came that Craig sent to me from the driving line about the end of Foxbodies as the affordable fun car, which for some of our viewers might be a little too young for Foxbodies to have ever been affordable, but for me and Craig at least, um, there was definitely an era when we were early into our car scene where Foxbodies were cheap, like really cheap.
I had one. Yeah,
Like a ratty,
$4,000.
like a ratty V8 was like $2,000, and like $4 or $5 would get you into a pretty decent GT, like halfway nice V8 car. And like
Yeah,
four-cylinder
I had a
Foxes
low
were worth
miles.
almost nothing because no one cares.
Yeah, I had an LX, an auto LX, but it was low miles and the
Yeah,
body was straight as an arrow.
I said like 3, 4, maybe $5 would get you a nice GT, decent option pack, everything else, and they were
Mm-hmm.
these days they're probably not impressive to drive, but they're
Spry.
fun in a weird way.
Yeah.
They're light. They feel kind of like they're made out of beer cans.
Well, it's
Go ahead.
yeah, it's the sketchy fun, right? It's not
Yeah.
the small car fast. It's the sketchy fun. If that makes
Sketch
sense.
factor and fun factor are definitely closely related. Sketchy stuff is fun.
Oh, it's also a short wheelbase V8,
Yeah,
which
also
is
that.
always great.
Also that. But so the topic of the day, right, is that those are no longer affordable, as some of our uh, younger listeners may not remember them ever being affordable, but they were, and they're kind of not now. Like a decent Fox is, I'd say 8, 9 grand nowadays for a pretty clean Fox with a good title and decent miles.
And going up
Yeah, and it's just a thing of the times, right? They
weekly,
didn't
it's
make but
going
so
up.
they made a bunch of them, but they did only make so many, and now they're getting older. A whole bunch of them have been race
Mm-hmm.
carred by this point, so the remaining good shaped street cars are getting rarer and more expensive. And also, times have moved on in what
Mm-hmm.
fast is to the point that a mild bolt on Fox these days just isn't fast anymore.
And well,
That
it's
said,
acceptable. It's acceptable quick.
yeah. And in that same vein, shortly after well, I shouldn't say shortly after, but I think the next cheap car after the Fox, that's also rapidly dying out as far as being cheap fast, was the LS1 F body.
Mhm.
Right, all through the late '90s into the super early 2000s, they were making these things, and then in the late late aughts into the early teens, you could get them for really cheap. Our friend Justin from the channel has bought and parted out and swapped, Jesus, probably 7 or 8 of them,
Yeah, and
and
wants another
they're
one.
and wants another one. Yeah, but now they're getting expensive. Eh, situation we're all in, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at one point, those were the dirty cheap, right? LS1 auto F body for cheap money. Put a radial on it and spray some nitrous down the LS1 and go fast for no money. That was the hot ticket.
Yep.
But those are getting expensive now
Yep.
too. A decent Trans Am these days is like 10 grand, which is not an unreasonable amount of money, I guess, for what the car is capable of. But then you have to deal with the fact that like C5s are like 8 grand and better in most ways. So yeah. So the topic of the day is what's going to be the next cheap. We're going to call it the next Fox body, but really, I guess it'd be the next F body, the next cheap fun cars that are fast or can be fast for cheap money. Um, so we'll give a few options here, and also a few things that maybe would appear to be good options, but they're not for one reason or another.
Okay.
So for our generation, and it's very similar year wise, it's only a couple of years newer than the F bodies. The one of the first ones that come to mind for me is the WRXs, early WRXs, because they're starting to get cheap now. I don't know that I'm ever going to see those become
Yeah.
the same kind of cheap fast though, because they blow up a lot.
Yeah. All
And
the ones out here have been engine swapped already with JDM engines. And then
yeah, I
Question
mean, that was what
racer.
made the LS1 F body and the Fox even work, right? Was the fact that you could spray some nitrous down them and then beat on them for like 50,000 miles, and they would
Yeah.
just take it.
Yep.
And Subarus aren't like that at all.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah.
They are they are a robust engine, however, and
Mhm.
the great thing about Subarus is it's kind of everything else about the Subaru community is that the Series 2 Subaru goes all the way back to 95 and goes all the way to 2007. So you
Right.
have, what is that, almost 12 years of parts, inventory, and warehousing and catalogs of Lego bits so you can stick things together. They even made a diesel version of the Boxer, and it's accessible, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a Forester, an Outback, the WRX, the Impreza. Bits and bobs are available for it, and it kind of keeps the whole cheap car fat or cheap fast car thing going.
It also helps they
The
put the
downside
exact
is
same.
that
Good.
oh, the downside is that you do have a temperamental engine that needs to be tuned properly and have the good bits and some special, nagels that come with being in a Subaru.
Sure. There's the good side though. They use the same drivetrain in all of them, so really it's just a matter of which body style is your preference. Because
Yeah,
functionally, Outback, Legacy, Forester, WRX, they're all functionally identical.
yeah,
Whichever body
and
style
your
floats your
choice
boat.
of your choice of the transmissions too. If you want 5 or 6 speeds, if you want 440 gears to 477s to the taller 390s, I think.
Yeah, 3.7 and the
Just
0607
plug and play.
WRXs. Yeah, it's all plug and play Legos. That's good description.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
my thing is, I would not
Yep.
think that they're going to be the thing because, well, they don't like going to drag strips. It's just kind of a thing. They blow up transmissions.
Um,
Ask me how I know.
I don't know. I think they're also Yeah, I also think they're starting to get to they weren't the WRXs, the turbo models, they'll say in general,
Yeah,
because there's a lot of NA models out there, but the turbo models have gotten they weren't super so common, they were easily accessible, and like I said, the ones that are out there are either crashed, totaled, rebuilt, blown up engines, engine swap JDM ones. Like I'm out here in SoCal, and if you have a original engined WRX or STI, you have a pot of gold because everybody wants that, and all the kids are out there in $3,000 beaters with Japanese swapped engines that can't pass smog.
I forgot about the smog thing out in Cali. That's a thing.
Yeah,
Um,
it's hard to get a Japanese engine to pass Cali smog.
so going from them, I guess the next one would be since the Camaro was the last of the Americans to die. The later fifth generation LS Camaros are getting cheap nowadays. I don't think they're quite that cheap yet, but they're getting
Yeah,
there. But they're kind of
yeah,
not the same as the old ones were.
they're they're also not good.
Right. Fifth gens are just kind of
Steven
not.
has a yeah. Steven has a big complaint about like sitting in them. Everyone has it. They all talked about it when they did the reviews. You can't see out of them. It's like driving a tank, whatever else. When I bring up the whole, they're not that good. The chassis tuning on it, the valving, the dampening, the suspension pickup points, all had to get revised for the Gen 6s and got a lot better. But when they first came out, you want to talk about a car that was not a sports car. It was a pony car. It went fast in a straight line, made V8 burbly noises. And if you're a Chevy guy, you bought it anyways because you didn't have anything else to buy.
But they
They
didn't
just
go
weren't all
fast in a
good.
straight line either, right? Because they had bad wheel hop problems. They had that Getrag IRS.
Yeah, and that was before the LS3, wasn't it? They were still
Yeah,
using
that's
the
LS2s.
LS2. Yeah, which are good engines, but nowadays, if you're not making 400 horsepower in a V8, you're not relevant. So
Right.
take that for what it is. I don't even think they broke the 370. Right, they were still
I
330
don't
or
remember.
something like that.
I think it was like 360, something like that. But they made decent power, but the rest of the car
Yeah,
just
I'll have it
wasn't
up.
very good. Yeah, Craig will put it in here.
Yeah, I'll
The
have it
rest
up
of
on
the
the
car just
screen.
wasn't very good. Like drivability wasn't good. They didn't feel good. They hopped bad. They dove bad under braking. Like it just wasn't a good car.
They look kind of stupid. Sorry,
Also
Bumblebee.
that.
Just,
Yeah.
they
Right.
really
So
look kind of dumb.
what else we got in this pile? 350Zs are getting down into the price money. They're kind of pony cars.
The Z and Gs. Um, I don't know if I want to touch on them, but they're kind of in that cheap accessibility power. They're
They
better
made a
than the S
lot of
chassis.
They made a lot of them. I mean, a
Yeah,
lot.
super accessible. However, no, we can bring it up because like the aftermarket loved it a whole lot. It has a good V6. You're gonna have ringland issues. They got axle clicking issues. The electronics suck after a while. You're buying it for the engine and the chassis, and that's it. Everything else you're gonna have to fix up. Electronics.
Right on. I still think it's and people don't think of it as a pony car, but I really kind of feel like it is, especially
No,
in the
it's
G
Japanese.
trim. It's the
Yeah,
Japanese
it's
pony
Japanese
car.
muscle.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And honestly, people don't think of it as a like Mustang and Camaro competitor, but if we're talking about like old LS Camaros and Foxbody Mustangs, it totally is.
or or the two valve mod motors.
We just
It
skipped that
totally
era of
is.
Mustangs. We're just gonna skip that era of Mustang. We're gonna
That's the
pretend
era
that
you
New Edge.
own. You own that era. That's yours.
I don't have to claim them.
Um,
So I'll go on a tangent here for a second. New Edges. I own a New Edge, as Craig alluded. I own, in my obviously heavily biased opinion, the best of the New Edges, but I also think most people would agree with me on that one. Uh, the Terminator is the coolest New Edge ever. It just is. But those are kind of
yep. Period.
mildly unobtainable for a lot of people, and they're definitely not cheap. But the other,
They are a mechanic or car guy special, I guess. It's not a normal person's vehicle.
no, they require a lot
Not
of
anymore.
care and feeding.
Yeah, it's 30 years old, so it's not a normal person's vehicle anymore. It's
Oh, 20. All right. I'm not that old. Uh, but anyway, yeah. So termites require a ton of care and feeding.
17
Not
years
something I
old.
would recommend to people as a yeah. Mine's 18, but yeah, they require a lot of care and feeding. Not something I
Yeah,
would recommend to people as a like cheap pony car because a cheap termy is not going to be
right.
good. But
Well, it's not the same as a cheap Fox body was.
no, not at all. Now that
Yeah.
said, a Mach 1 or a 99 to 01 Cobra, the pre-Terminator Cobras, the 4 valve cars,
Mm-hmm.
they're in that price range actually. They're sub 10 grand and maybe they're healthy, healthy motor, decent 5 speed. Maybe I could
I
see it.
like I like the I like the azure blue. I'm gonna get
The Azure, yeah, the Azure
I'm gonna
Blue,
get made fun of for that. But it's
the Mach 1.
yeah, it's the Mach One. It's not the Grabber Blue, it's the other one. But yeah, like I
Yeah,
still think the Mach One. I would be that guy who has the counterpart to Steven's Terminator. I would have the Mach One, which is a lesser vehicle, but
I don't know that it's
it's less
lesser.
about
It's
the power in
different.
that car and more about it's yes, the nostalgia. It's supposed to be
Yeah,
the more track oriented car. They kept the live axle. Yeah, but
sure, but like it's
yeah, I don't know.
the hood and hood scoop like makes the car just
Well, I was going to bring up the other contender that we're also going to say no to, but it's the LX platform Chargers, which are dirt cheap horsepower.
they are cheap horsepower, but once again, much like the Camaro, right? The engine's good. The rest of the car, on the other hand, not so much.
Yeah, and
Craig owns
so I
one.
have personal experience with
Yeah,
this as well.
take it away.
It's an '07 RT, and it had the for early generation of MDS and the 5.7 liter Hemi, which that in itself isn't bad, right? It's 400 or it's 345 horsepower. It came with I think it was a 4-speed, 5-speed automatic.
Oh yeah, that was the old Nag
The
one,
engine and the
the
noise it made,
Mercedes Auto.
yeah, yeah. The engine and noise that it made was fine. And actually, as far as what it was, which was kind of like the continuation of what the Panther should have been, it was actually not a bad people hauler. It got the same 21 miles to the gallon or whatever else. It was all the small stuff. It nickel dimed me to death. I had to rebuild the brake calipers 3 different times because they kept seizing up. Control arm broke on me at one point. It didn't break, but I noticed there was a wobble and one of the arms was cracked. The rear wiring harness on the trunk snapped because I closed the trunk on it. All stuff was repaired free from Dodge when I bought it, but it was just like it nickel dimed me to death. And then outside of getting on the highway and just cruising or going fast in a straight line, which I knocked down 12/8 in a quarter mile with it, it didn't turn. The brakes were way too small. The suspension was all wrong. It's all stuff they fixed after what was the redesign 2013.
Yeah,
They kind of
the
fixed
Charger
it
got a lot better after the
a
redesign, much
lot
like the
better.
Camaro, really.
Yeah. Um, And if you can pick one up for dirt cheap and kind of know that it's kind of like a Crown Vic at this point, where it's just cheap power and good seats, sure. Um, but I
See, the
don't
thing
recommend
is,
it for an enthusiast that's trying to go hardcore.
yeah, it needs so much to be good. You know what I mean? And some of that stuff's like not easy to fix. Like the suspension issues, those aren't.
Yeah,
There's not a.
unless
There's
you
not
can
an
get the
easy fix for that.
SRT8.
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother game. But those aren't cheap.
Yeah,
That's
no,
kind of a thing.
it's still like an SRT8 Magnum.
So all of that said, to say, we talked about this obviously before airing this, and we both came to the same conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked about this a couple times on air, right? But normally
Mm-hmm.
we come to different conclusions on stuff, and we'll usually both say, hey, either one of these options is good. Maybe it's just a difference of opinion thing. 350Cs make terrible noises, stuff like that. But in this case, both me and Craig totally 100% agree what the next pony car is going to be, and it is the three valve Mustang.
Well,
Where
yeah.
the one, the
I don't
late,
even correct Steven here. It's not the next pony car. It's the
or the next
next.
cheap fast car, I guess.
Yeah, it's the next dollar per horsepower car that you're going to get. It's 315 horsepower. You can pick them up from anywhere from $4,000 all the way up to 15. Choose your flavor, model package, manual, automatic. Automatic doesn't suck. The manual
Yeah,
certainly doesn't suck. And it's still basic enough, Steven, where it's a Ford mod motor with an 8.8 rear end. Like it's still basic. It's still good. Um,
right. It's the
and they don't
early
have to drive with stock power.
right. This is the S197 chassis, which was the first really new edges weren't any. They're foxes, right? New edges are fat foxes when it comes down to it,
Mm-hmm.
unless you're talking about a
Mm-hmm.
Cobra. They're just fat foxes,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons I think that they're not really a contender in this. But the S197, right, went to a 3-link rear. It's still a solid axle, but it works a lot better. And it can be made to work really well for, relatively speaking, little money. You do an upper control arm to
Yeah.
kill the hop and some good shocks, and it works good. Like
Mm-hmm.
Craig said, the 3-valve motor makes either 305 or 315, depending on the year and trim pack. But honestly,
If
it's
it's
10
after
horsepower. It
'07.
doesn't matter. Yeah, it's 10 horsepower. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's I think the intake manifold was redesigned.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Um, but they normally lay down with mild bolt-ons, and by mild I mean like an intake and a tune. They lay down near 300 wheel, like 290, 295 wheel, which is healthy. Like that is a
Yep.
healthy, fun street car level.
Yeah.
They make the as all Ford mod motors do. They make the right noise. They've got the burble, the Mustang sound.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, the nicest of them, in my opinion, is probably the Bullet. It's just got the look. I
Yes.
love the Bullet. Uh, some would argue
Yeah.
the what is that 2010, the final year of production, where they got the slightly newer body redesign, but they still had the 3-valve.
That's the year that I want.
Yeah, to me those are I don't know. They're almost Coyote money, and they're not Coyotes. So
Yeah, and but if there's anyone out there who has a Sunburst Gold, um, a 4.6 with the 5-speed manual, either with the premium trim or without it, I don't care at this point. Come hit me up, because that's kind of like one of the cars I will sell my RX-8 for, because I think they look like the '70s Mach 1, or they
that's
can
fair.
look like a '70s Mach 1, but it
That's
has
fair.
the 4.6 that I like a whole lot, and does not have Coyote money attached to it.
Yeah. So that's my thing, I guess. Early 197s are, yeah, suspension got a lot better than the Fox and New Edge, which is basically the same suspension, just slightly newer. They got a whole new suspension that works a lot better in a lot of ways. The chassis works a lot better in a lot of ways. The 3-valve makes reasonable power pretty easily. And the biggest thing to me is the interior shift, right? Because a halfway decent, like Craig mentioned earlier, you get like $4,000 will get you a ratty 197. More like I'd say 7 to 8. Get
Yeah,
you a pretty decent 197 with a 3-valve and a 5-speed.
yeah,
And that same kind of money will also
mm,
get you a ratty Mach 1 or Cobra from the previous gen, which makes like the same power.
Mhm.
But the 197 interior is miles ahead of the new Edge. Like the 197 is the first Mustang interior since like the 80s that doesn't suck to be in. It's got decent seats,
I would
dash
even say
works.
73.
Yeah,
Yeah,
probably actually further back. Yeah. Right. I mean, as a Terminator owner,
yeah,
I'm the first guy to say that the new Edge interior sucks. It does. I know it.
yeah.
It rattles. The seating position's garbage. Steering wheel position's garbage. They have their
Materials cheap, fall apart.
yeah. They have their appeals, but that's not one of them. That said,
Mhm.
I still love my Terminator, but it's nothing to do with the interior. It's not what makes the car. But I think a new Edge, or sorry, a
Right.
S197 car could totally be a reasonably nice driver.
Yeah.
Right? You do some axle backs, maybe a tune, and just send it. Do sweet burnouts and
Yeah.
just beat on it and drive it all the time because you got like 7 grand in it. So fuck it.
Freiberger. Yeah, Freiberger brought this up back when he was doing it's a Motor Trend thing. I forget what segment it was. I think it was Hot Rod Garage, EBC, Mustang. Look it up. But he actually went over it and they bought like an '07 Mustang GT in black. And then he went over like the cheap mods that you do, which is like, wheels, tires, suspension. And it was all factory forward performance stuff. You got some American Muscle wheel and tire combination, factory forward performance, suspension, pan hard bar, and then GT 500 or FRP 500 uh, or FR 500 axle backs. And then you got like a tuner for or whatever else, all Cali legal stuff. And to be honest, the 4.6 is kind of a pooch. It doesn't make great power for the displacement, but it's one of those motors. It's Ford mantra: build something reliable that people can beat on and have a lot of good memories with, versus all out performance. And I would implore you guys to like, the mod motor is more reliable than LS, but it's at the sake
Mm,
of not making a whole lot of power.
mm.
How many Capris are out there with over 1,000,000 miles, Steven?
That's a fair
Anyways,
point.
but the series goes over the things that you can do to a Mustang, and if you know that you're not going to make a whole lot of high horsepower with it, it on the one hand, for cheap you can't make a whole lot of high horsepower for it, but on the other hand, they do last, and there are guys who do throw superchargers at it or throw turbo at it, and they do take power, and mod motors do wake up with turbos. Like,
Yeah, they like boost a lot.
yeah, the head flow design says that they can take boost really well, and that's also an option. That being said, a supercharged 3 valve is going to make the same power as a tuned up Coyote, but
But it
that's
makes blower
neither here
whine.
nor there. Yeah, but it makes blower wine. It's also about accessibility too, right? Like, not everyone has Coyote money, and the buy-in for those is still 20 grand 10 years later. It's disgusting.
Yeah,
So if you're looking for a cheap thrills vehicle, S197 is where it's at, I believe, and Steven
yeah,
believes.
for sure. Well, I think
Um,
so. I think we're both in total agreement here that the next cheap fast, basically what the Fox
mhm.
bodies were when we were first getting in the scene. Back when 5, 6
Yep.
grand would get you a decent Fox body that you could just go drive and beat on and do
Yeah.
burnouts in. And right now, 5 or 6 grand will get you a halfway
Hmm.
decent S197 with a stick shift and a 3 valve, and you can
Yep.
go do burnouts in it and run. It's
Yep.
reasonably quick muscle car kind of thing, pony car, whatever you want to call them.
Pause. And I was going to bring up that the S197 and Ford in general also promotes their vehicles in the different racing arenas. So you want to
For sure.
autocross it, they got suspension stuff for it. You want to drag race it, they got stuff for that. Take a look at the Cobra Jet. That's their prototype vehicles, but all that stuff does trickle down. Anything from the S197 all the way from, what was the first production year, '05
'05 to
into
14.
four, yeah, until 14. So it's 10 years of span. All those bits are plug and play.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're also on the kind of, Ford does drifting, right? They do drag racing, they do time attack, they do autocross, they do. You have support from the factory, which is always cool, and that it includes nowadays. We're getting to almost 15, 20 years later when this model came out. Where we're at? We're at 18. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, but yeah, we're getting 15 years after the fact that the model first appeared, and Ford Performance still has the catalog parts for it, and they still support the parts. Ford aftermarket, so Steeda, Roush still make parts for it, still get bits for it. It's just, It has everything you want for the best bang per buck vehicle that not many other manufacturers can hold a candle to. Nissan, you're relying purely on aftermarket to fix your car. Dodge, you're relying on the junkyard to fix your car.
There's not even a fix. Just
Yeah,
keep replacing it.
yeah, you're gonna hope for an SRT8 to tear those parts off of to fix yours. But that's the kind of world that you're getting into with the joys of the Foxbody and now the SN197, and that's why it gets our vote for the next cheap Foxbody. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, Steven, take us out.
Yeah. Like I said, this is I think the thing that you can buy for reasonable money as a young kid and just go beat the hell out of for
Mhm.
several years to come and do nothing but basic maintenance, get some cheap parts, and just have a good time. So that said, for everybody
Yeah.
out there, you guys got something else you think that didn't make the cut, or that we're just totally wrong, and that the Charger is God's gift to burnouts? Well, let us know in the comments below. Tell us why we're wrong. Uh, and on that note, we'll hit that outro.
Thank you so much for listening to the Broken Axle podcast. If you enjoyed us, please leave a comment and like and subscribe for more.
And if you want to help us out, we've got a new merch line. You can check the links below and follow our social media at the Broken Axle Podcast.
And you can find me on Instagram at nomadic.wheelman.
And you can find me on Instagram and Facebook as Just Can't Drive 55.
For the rest of us, hug your kids and call your mama.
And go bust some knuckles.